Not to worry. I just thought give that prerogative there. But moving on now, as we are, to our final round of speakers for this evening, I'm delighted to... I'm delighted to welcome Marta Lorimer again. I've got the wrong... It's been... This has been a remarkably haphazard... This has been a remarkably haphazard occasion. I apologise. Professor Marta Lorimer. Marta is a fellow at European politics at the LSE. Prior to joining the European Institute, she was the postdoctoral researcher at the University of Exeter. Apologies for my fumbling, and you have the ears of the House.
Great. Great. Well, thank you very much. This is a tough position to be in, the last speaker. And I feel that the first thing I have to do is reassure all of you. A United States of Europe will do absolutely nothing to your national identities. I say this as someone who has exercised freedom of movement several times, and I can tell you that nothing ever made me feel more Italian than eating overcooked pasta in a French restaurant. So that's the first point. When I looked at this motion, I thought it was going to be actually really hard to argue. And then I heard Sir John Redwood, and I was like, there you have, I have my case. What I heard in that speech wasn't, we don't have the United States of Europe, it's not good enough. What I heard is, we need the United States of Europe, so we're going to be good enough. So I don't think that's what you were going for, but it is what it is. That's what I heard. Now, the reason I thought this was going to be a difficult motion to argue was, first of all, this is the UK, a country that voluntarily decided to shoot itself in the foot, not my expression, opposition's expression, and leave the EU. I thought it was going to be challenging because in many ways the EU is already a United States of Europe. So why am I making the case that the EU is something that it already is? The third reason I thought this was going to be a bit difficult is because, let's face it, the last 15 years of EU politics read a little bit like a catalog of biblical plagues for the modern age. First, you had the Eurozone crisis. Then you had the rise of the radical right. Then you had the migration crisis. Then you had Brexit. Then you had COVID. Then you had a rule of law crisis, democratic backsliding. I'm pretty sure I'm forgetting something. But it just feels like it was one crisis after the other, relentlessly hitting the European Union. So it's not exactly a dream to try and sell it. The final thing, and yet another point of inspiration by Sir John Redwood, is that it did feel like it had a bit of a retro vibe to be saying, oh, we need a United States of Europe. It's a little bit like flare pants, low trousers jeans, the Venga Boys. Things that had a moment. They had a moment in the 90s. People thought they were a good idea. Now they're briefly back. We don't really know how it happened. And we're just looking and saying, okay, you had your moment. What are you doing here? So I just felt this is a bit of a weird, it's a strange proposition to be defending. And now that I've dug my hole and told you why I think it's a very different motion, I'm going to try and convince you that there's actually a good reason to be thinking about a United States of Europe. And the point that I'm going to be making is that we have to believe in a United States of Europe because what the European Union needs right now is direction. And we need a new political imagination for where we're going next. So the problem with the European Union is not a lot of what we've heard. The problem with the European Union is not what you hear from the Daily Mail, that the European Union is falling apart, everyone is going to leave, and join the UK in a club because misery likes company. That's not what's happening. The EU has, in fact, been remarkably resilient. So think about just 15 years ago, we were sitting in rooms waiting to hear about Brexit. We were waiting for Greece to be kicked out of the European Union. Did that happen? No, it didn't happen. Greece is still in the European Union. More member states have joined the Eurozone. We heard the same thing around Brexit, or I mean, you would have heard it here in this country where everyone was saying, yeah, we're leaving, someone else is going to come with us. Did that happen? No. So the problem with the EU isn't that the EU is falling apart. The problem is that it's not really working very well. And if it ain't broke, don't fix it, doesn't really work as a logic for a political union. So I believe there is a lot that we can do to make the European Union work better. The European Union in the last, again, 15 or 20 years has been looking a bit like the headless chicken of international politics, just basically scrambling from one crisis to the other, trying to find solutions, usually standing on a ledge at knife point in the middle of the night behind closed doors where everyone is sleep deprived and trying to find out what we're doing. So this really can't go on. And this is why I think that we have to believe in a United States of Europe. And I agree with my colleague here that what we need is a United States of Europe, not necessarily the United States of Europe. And it's also why I won't be able to give a satisfactory answer to the question that was asked earlier about, okay, but then what is the United States of Europe? And the reason I can't answer that question is because I don't think that it's up to me to answer it. It is a collective decision that we have to make. And this is why I think that believing in a United States of Europe is one way to answer that question, or to at least start a conversation for a new political imagination of the Europe of tomorrow. So, in sum, I believe that we have to believe in a United States of Europe, not because we necessarily believe in a specific federal project, but because we have to reopen the idea of what it means to be a European Union. We need a new political imagination for the future. We need to have contested ideas of what it means to be European, what it means to be a union. Yes?
Is the most likely political imagination will rise in the next 10 or 15 years after collaboration between states, a very far-right idea of Europe, one in which those states controlled by far-right parties newly elected would manipulate treaties to pass extremely contentious legislation?
So I'm glad you asked that question. I'm actually a researcher of the radical right, so these are my favorite people in the world. I love talking about them. And I'm going to give you a wonderful, wonderful quote by Jean-Marie Le Pen in 1984. You know what he said? He said that we should kick the UK outside of the European Union because they weren't committed to the project. So this is to tell you that far-right parties can sometimes have very different positions on Europe than the ones that you would expect them to hold. Look at Giorgia Meloni. Same. People were saying, oh, yeah, she's going to go in, Eurosceptic. I mean, if you look at what her predecessors were saying, they were pretty pro-European. And she has taken a fairly pro-European stance, maybe to rebuild herself of virginity in international politics. But this is, you don't really know where they're going to go. I don't think they know it either, to be fair. They'll talk to you about a Europe of the nations. No one knows what that means. So yes, so in sum, I believe that speaking of a United States of Europe is going to help us pursue a project, a new project of European unity that will have a clear direction of travel, a direction that will be transparent, that will be co-decided, and that will hopefully take the European Union into its next 100 years. Thank you very much.